Welcome to the channel. I'm Hayes. I'll talk movies all day. Sometimes I'll talk about games. So subscribe right now if you want to be entertained. And today, I want to talk about Paracom, a paranormal horror role-playing indie game by developer and publisher Still Widow Klan. Now here's the disclaimer. Still Widow Klan reached out to me to offer a free game code in exchange for a review on the channel. Now I like getting free stuff, but I also gotta be able to give my honest view. So although I'm not getting paid or sponsored in any way, you should still know I like getting free stuff, so there is still a potential for bias. Another thing you should know, I did not complete this game. Now some of you might be thinking that means my review ain't worth nothing, and that's a fair position to take, but I would be explaining why I didn't complete this game, and perhaps in that there's something someone can take value in. So what is Paracom, and is it worth your £9.29? Paracom is a role-playing game where you take on the role of Bishop, the leader of an elite commando squad that specializes in investigating paranormal activities, hence the name Paracom. It's a turn-based RPG, kinda, as in everyone moves according to their turn, but it doesn't actually tell you whose turn it is. So when you're selecting your moves, they might not execute right away, and they might not always execute in the same order in each round. And when the devs reached out to me, they recommended that I play the tutorial before playing the main game, so that's what I did. But here's the thing, it's a lot of reading. I mean a lot of reading. Now you gotta understand, I get up early, I go to work, I do my job, I go home, I handle my business, and at the end, my gaming time is limited, if even existent at all. And often at a time when I'm already tired, and you want me to read? I ain't gonna lie, I'm not taking it all in, I'm skimming over a few words and then hitting the enter button to move on. I ain't gonna remember all that anyway. And once I started playing the main game, for the most part, it felt like you could have just figured out what to do anyway. Well, let me get back to that. The game is relatively clear on what your objectives are. During battles, there's a short description of what each item or command does, so you can always experiment with different things to find out which tactics work best. Interestingly enough though, the only commands that doesn't have a short description is the cover option, but I'm gonna come back to that too. As far as playing the game goes, it's pretty standard affair for RPGs. It starts off a little slow, but once you get into your groove, it's a pretty decent game. There's a few times it gives you a choice of what to do. I didn't get the impression the choices mattered that much, but it's nice to have. My general tactic was to reload my weapons and replenish my health after each battle to make sure I was going into the next encounter fully prepared. As to whether or not that was a good strategy, let me get back to that one as well. There's a pretty good variety of enemy types even in the early stages, so figuring out different tactics was a cool challenge. You control the game primarily with the arrow keys and the enter button, so although navigating menus wasn't an issue, moving around in-game definitely felt a little clunky at times. But aside from that, I was enjoying playing. It still managed to create an intriguing, eerie experience, kinda like playing through an interactive horror movie. The graphics were, fine for what it is. Certainly didn't feel out of place or distracting. The game runs by default in a small windowed box, though you can switch to full screen, but it doesn't keep the settings, so each time you load up the game, you have to manually switch back to full screen. But that's a minor. I was still genuinely looking forward to seeing how it all plays out. So I reckon by now you might be wondering, well, if the game was mostly pretty good, why would you stop playing? Well, short answer, it went from pretty good to pretty frustrating pretty quick. Long answer, there is no map in this game. No big map, no mini map, no map at all. And to be fair, it didn't feel like it needed one until I get to a point where I found and defeated the second tourist. I know there are more tourists to be found. I know there are more paranormal activities to investigate. But what I don't know is, where exactly am I supposed to be going? I'm looking for clues, I'm walking up to all kinds of things and pressing enter to see if anything happens, but nope. So now I'm just wandering around trying to avoid enemies while hitting enter on random objects. Oh, why am I avoiding enemies? Because I have no ammo and I'm super low on health. And as it turns out, enemies don't drop ammo or health or seemingly anything useful when defeated. Plus on top of that, finding ammo or health is an absolute rarity if ever. Now as I said before, my gaming time could often be limited and my patience even more so. I don't need a game to be some super easy walkthrough, but I do need to feel like I'm at least getting some somewhere. And when I'm spending 20 plus minutes walking around aimlessly, bruh, I gotta be up early for work tomorrow. By the way, avoiding enemies is pretty easy for the most part, but there are some tricky ones. When you get into an encounter, there is the option to retreat instead of battling, but selecting that option doesn't always result in a retreat. More than a few times I took plenty of hits before actually retreating. Bear in mind, I'm already super low on health. So yeah, I'm done. I didn't beat the game beat me. Now, some of you might be thinking, hold up, you said you were skimming through the tutorial. Maybe if you bothered to read it, you'd know what you're supposed to be doing. And to that I say, yeah, you're right. So as much as I didn't want to start the game again, I started the game again, and I also played through the tutorial again, and I forced myself to read every last word. And what I learned from that, yeah, I probably should have been paying attention the first time, I ain't gonna lie. Going through it again, I spotted a few things I could have tried, like using the defibrillator to revive fallen team members, and using the cover option to skip around but have stronger defense on the next round. Also, playing through the game again reminded me of the fact that you can go back outside the house to refill your ammo and health. So the moral of the story, not all games are like IKEA furniture. But in the end, the game still got pretty frustrating for me. For one thing, depending on where you are in the house, going back outside to refill can be a trek. Now, it's not impossible a game like this might have some hidden shortcuts. I don't know. I never found any. I was just walking all the way back like the Proclaimers. Plus, it seems you could only go outside the house to refill once. Or certainly it wasn't clear to me at what intervals you can go outside to refill. And by the way, this time I'm making sure I read everything. But when I ran out of ammo again and walked all the way back again, man just got air. Also, you can't use a defibrillator during encounters, only after. And the only other way to revive a fallen member is to use the bandage, but the bandage is self-use only, and incapacitated members don't get a turn during battles. So there's seemingly no way to revive team members during encounters, not as far as I could tell anyway. Basically, if you lose a team member for at least the rest of that battle, you're screwed. Also, bandages only give you 20 HP, and even some of the early enemies hits way harder than that. The cover option is supposed to boost your defense, but if it didn't seem to do it in any noticeable way. Felt like I was just missing around just to end up taking the same or sometimes even more damage when I could have just attacked twice. When the battle is over, you can go into the menu to revive, replenish and reload, but in parts of the game when you're getting swarmed, you have literally no time in between the end of one encounter and the start of the next to even get into the menu. Not to mention, if by some fluke you manage to open the menu before you're attacked again, using the reload commands to reload your weapons sends you right back into the game, where you're just gonna get attacked right away. And by the way, you can only reload one team member at a time. So when you're getting swarmed, you very quickly end up going into battles grossly underprepared. You could try retreating, but like I said, that don't always go so well. And even if you do retreat from battle, you're just gonna get swarmed right away again. Alright, let's talk about the difficulty settings now. There are 3 difficulty settings to choose from. Guns Blazing, which is the easiest, Easy, which is actually the medium difficulty, and Realistic, which is the hardest difficulty setting. First time I played, I tried the medium difficulty, but when I started again, I switched to the easiest, Guns Blazing mode. Yeah, I know, I don't like choosing easy mode either. It's embarrassing. It's like people who watch gold digger prank videos on YouTube thinking they're real. You should be ashamed of yourself. Anyway, the main differences between Guns Blazing and Easy mode is that Guns Blazing lets you save anywhere, whereas Easy mode you can only save at save nodes. Also, Guns Blazing gives you more ammo. Though that said, I'm not sure that ammo is as nearly unlimited as the description suggests. Best as I can tell, the regular enemies aren't much if any easier to defeat, but it was definitely a much more noticeable difference when encountering the larger enemies. But that's also one of the reasons I don't like playing games on the easier setting. It removes most, if not all, the challenge, which basically defeats the purpose of it being a game in the first place. Honestly, if I wasn't writing this review, I probably just wouldn't play it. And yes, I know there's a lot of people out there who would say that's a stupid attitude to have, because in the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter. So was my tactic of reloading and replenishing after each encounter a good one? Clearly not. But to my mind, the only other thing I could have tried is to avoid fighting as many enemies as possible, but if I did that, I won't level up or collect any samples. By the way, it was never really clear what exactly the samples are for. Like, you collect samples after defeating each enemy, but what do you actually do with them? Maybe the game has some kind of trading system? I don't know. I didn't get that far. And the only way to know is if I start the game again. But speaking of how far I got, Steam clocked me at 9.4 hours. I definitely got further along with the easier setting than I did with the medium setting, but the fact that after starting again, reading everything, trying different options, and taking nearly 10 hours just to end up with the same problems I had 7 hours ago, tells me I'm still doing something very wrong. So, who is this game for? I think for people who don't have a lot of gaming time, or people who might only get to play when it's already late, you can skip this one. Not only is there no map, there's also no in-game log. So anything that happens or any clues you find, if it was a while back and you forgot about it, forget about it. There is nothing to remind you. So you either start again like I did, or you keep notes. And let's be real, you ain't gonna do none of those. Also, there's no cloud saves. So if you regularly spend time in more than one location, maybe you get a spare little 20 minutes, you load up the game, none of your saves are there. And we already know you're not gonna start the game again. Also, I don't have a Steam Deck to confirm, but it's not listed as Steam Deck compatible. So for people with little time, I can't recommend this. But if you're really curious, maybe add it to your wish list and wait for a sale. But as for everyone else, it's not necessarily a bad game. The story seems pretty interesting. I like the atmosphere and the general feel of the game. It's a type of game that I might have been more inclined to keep playing if I didn't have bills to pay. So for those of you still blessed enough to have time and patience, this is one you might want to check out sometime. Just make sure you have a notepad nearby. But that's what I think of Paracom. What do you think of Paracom? Let me know down below, and while you're there, be sure to like, subscribe, and drop a suggestion if you don't mind.